And Peter, this is an issue for you and your partners who set up this group with the European Conservatives, the British Conservatives, thinking you would get a party in government with a big majority, instead of which you've got something which is marginalised, neutered, possibly watered down by one of the most pro-European parties in Britain.
Well, I'm very confident that it will work very well. You see, we have now this new group in the European Parliament, and we have had decisive positions in several votings. For instance, when Mr. Barroso entered his new job, we were the decisive key element in the voting. And of course we are still working here in Parliament with other groups. I just came from a hearing we organised with the EPP on road transport issues, so we work together. And as a third element, I would like to add, I think that's the most important position. The new government in Great Britain has a Euro-realistic line, and it might be a little different from, for instance, the Christian Democrats in Europe. But because Great Britain is so important, the voice of the British government will be heard, because you cannot do things here without listening to Great Britain.
So no matter whether or not
country.
They're in that club or not. Alex?
Well, I would tend to agree with Rafał, rather, because when one looks at the European Parliament, we are used to working together across party lines all the time. But at the level of prime ministers, foreign ministers who get together in these leaders' meetings, the Liberal leaders' meetings in our case, the EPP leaders' meetings in the EPP's case, David Cameron is out in the cold. Whereas Nick Clegg, of course, has a role to play in this Liberal context. And this is indeed where many of the things are prepared that take place in the Council, so where the governments meet. I believe that the Tories were ill-advised to leave the EPP. Angela Merkel, I know for sure, was extremely unhappy about it. And she now has to work with a partner who's no longer in her political family, despite of the fact that he's a right-of-centre politician.
But as Peter says, I mean, in the end...
It is a party that is very important. It's one of the biggest countries in Europe, and therefore you cannot ignore the position of Great Britain in those debates.
Sometimes you can ignore the position of Great Britain.
I'll say, first of all, I'd say one thing, that when the internal vote was taken within the Conservatives working in the European Parliament, who really know how this institution works and how the European works, an immense majority of them voted to stay within the EPP, so actually they are aware of the problems that it will create. Of course everyone will listen to the British government, but the whole European politics is about informality, about those meetings which take place in an informal atmosphere, which actually pre-cook the deals, when you can talk to your commissioners, when you can get the information and so on and so forth. Then that's where you're effective.
And interesting, the point that you make, let me just pick up on that, Alex, is that the Liberal Democrats, on the other hand, as the junior partners, are much more tapped into that political family structure. There are 4 leaders and there are 8 commissioners, aren't there? Do you think that will make a difference?
Well, I hope it's going to make a difference, and it's going to show the value of a pro-European attitude inside the UK government. Because what happens now is, of course, that on some issues the United Kingdom is indeed ignored. Look at this entire debate about the euro. The United Kingdom is not inside the euro, so all the important economic and financial decisions are taken inside the euro group, and the United Kingdom only comes into the room, once these decisions have been taken.
Well, the Liberal Democrats have just signed an agreement to say for the next 5 years they will not join the euro.
Well, this is the character of a coalition agreement. I mean, for example, my party is for the abolition of the draft, the military draft in Germany. We want a professional army. The Christian Democrats want to keep the draft. So you have to compromise.
Yes.
That is the nature of a coalition treaty.
On a positive note, when it comes to this new British government, I think that if it were only the Conservative government, they would have had a huge problem with European policy, because the party has its own policy which is in a sense a little bit counterproductive. And we have experiences in 96, 97 where the Conservative Party actually crushed under the European dispute. I think that the coalition with a very pro-European party will give them an excuse to have a very sort of pragmatic policy towards Europe. And in this sense, we will all sort of benefit. The Brits.
Well, maybe not all. I mean, Peter was joining up with the Tories on the basis that they were going to have a strong Euro realist, if you want to call it, government. That may not happen.
Well, I see Euro-realism as the key word, and I've seen Mr. Cameron doing a great job in the last 3-4 years with the Conservative Party. He has made it more a centre party with key issues such as environment. That's for my party also a very important issue, and I'm sure that in his thinking on environment and green issues, he will find a constructive way of dealing with other parties. That's one thing. Another thing is, yes, they decided to stay out of the Eurozone. That's their decision. And there are many more countries, even in this parliament, that stayed out of the Eurozone. So you should not be too dramatic.
Perhaps more these days. But let me ask you, as a fellow Liberal, Alex Lambsdorff, we've seen roughly what your British colleagues have signed up to, the Liberal Democrats with the Tories. One of those things is to examine the case for a United Kingdom sovereignty bill. Now, do you think that's going too far?
Well, it depends on what this examination yields. I think this was a pet project of the Tories, and as I said, a coalition treaty negotiation always, results in compromise. I for one, would not want us in Germany to decide on a German sovereignty bill.
Although apparently it's based on the German system.
Well, no, we don't have a German sovereignty bill. The preamble of our constitution very clearly makes reference to a united Europe as a goal of German policy. So I think, we can discuss it philosophically. What is sovereignty at the beginning of the 21st century? If you don't do it together in Europe, you'll probably be at a loss, because with, China, Brazil, India, the story of globalization, I need not to go over it again. Yes. Sovereignty is a very relative concept.
But in the meantime, the Conservatives have dropped their explicit commitment to repatriating social and employment
That's exactly
policy.
what I wanted to say. I mean, you have to read the fine print of this coalition agreement. I mean, the Conservatives were saying we have to even question the Lisbon Treaty. We have to look at, the competences and so on. And when you read the fine print, it says, well, let's reassess our sort of relation when it comes to that point, which is very vague. And it gives one specific example, which is the working time directive, with which the Liberals, some of us in the EPP have problems and so on. So I think if this is only about sort of looking at the competence and saying, yes, we will defend the British interest on certain issues, I mean, that's normal. We all do it. So I don't suspect
implicitly, the Tories accepted the Lisbon Treaty.
Indeed.
And that's the first success of the Liberal Democrats.
We'll have to leave it there, though, but obviously, as we say, the proof will be in the pudding.